Welcome to the Jewels of the Trade podcast. We recently dropped a YouTube video all about the do's and don'ts of pearl buying, featuring Jeremy Shepard of Pearl Paradise. This podcast episode features the full unedited interview so that you can soak up every detail Jeremy discusses regarding online pearl scams, including misuse of the pearl grading system, types of pearls, and pearl myth busting. Anyone watching this, especially professionals in the jewelry industry, is invited to take CPAA's Pearls As One online course, completely free if you use the code JOTT at checkout. I've taken the course myself and recommend it to anyone in the jewelry industry. I'm here with Jeremy Shepard from Pearl Paradise, and this video is for the customer who wants to make sure they buy quality pearls for a fair price. Welcome, Jeremy.
Thank you. It's great to be here, Jordan. I appreciate it.
Well, let's jump right in. When shopping for pearls online, customers will often see pearls labeled as A, AA, AAA, which is supposed to indicate pearl quality. But this grading system is not what it seems, and some sellers use this ambiguity to mislead customers into believing they're getting a better deal than they actually are. Jeremy, can you discuss the pearl grading dilemma and explain why customers need to be so discerning?
Yeah, Jordan, absolutely. I think this is probably one of the biggest mistakes people make when they're shopping for pearls. They shop for pearls the way they might shop for diamonds. What I mean by that is when you're shopping for diamonds, you know what the C's are. You know, you're looking for particular cut, particular clarity, etc. And it's commodified. So diamonds will be GIA certified or EGL certified. And when you know what that means or what the values are, and you know how to use the Rappaport pricing guide, you know what the value is of the diamonds. Pearls are completely different. And people don't really understand that. And what I mean by that is that there are no internationally recognized grading standards for pearls. Now, in the industry, we know that there's like luster, there's shape, there's color, there's surface, but all of the standards are subjective. What that means is that if you're looking at a pearl that is graded AAA, for example, by a seller, and you're thinking, okay, well, this is a AAA pearl or AAA strand of pearls. I'm going to do some research and see if I can find a AAA strand of pearls for a little bit less. The reality is that AAA only means something to the person that's selling it. If there were 1,000 pearl sellers lined up in a row, there would be 1,000 different versions of AAA. Which is why you can go on eBay, for example, and type in AAA Akoya pearls, and you can buy a strand of AAA Akoya pearls for $10, $15, $20. Yet you go to Mikimoto, and that same strand is $20,000. So grading is completely subjective when it comes to pearls, and shopping by grade is the biggest mistake I think people make when they shop for pearls.
Absolutely. I strongly agree. So if not the quality, like the A, AA, AAA, I guess I should say the quality term, the quality designation, what should customers be looking for if they're shopping online to make sure that they're getting actual, I say this, AAA quality pearls?
Well, of course, actual AAA quality pearls is kind of a misnomer. Like, what does that mean? Well, shopping online can be dangerous, of course. People hide behind websites, computer screens. You really never know who you're dealing with and what you're buying. In shopping online, more important than anything else is know who you're buying from, and specifically know what background the people have that you're buying from, how they source their pearls, how they grade their pearls. I would say the number one tip I would give is that this is an important purchase for almost anyone. I mean, it could be a few $100s up to tens of thousands of dollars. Ask for photos. Talk to the people you're actually buying from. Don't just buy something randomly from a website, because if you do, you have no idea what you're going to get.
Absolutely. Can you talk a little bit about the presence of unscrupulous pearl sellers on the internet and different internet scams that are misleading pearl customers?
I would say the number one scam is definitely the grading, in that people try to create a yardstick or a measuring stick, for example, and saying, hey, my AAA is cheaper than anybody else's, or my AA plus is cheaper than anybody else's. And the reality is there's no comparison. It's impossible to compare. There's also the fact that websites are really easy to make, and any stories are really easy to tell. In researching websites or researching sellers, things to watch for are, A, do they have a telephone number? That's always really important, but not just do they have a telephone number. Does the telephone number work? Is it a real telephone number? If you call the telephone number, is there a message that says, I'm sorry, our phones are not answered, or or please leave a message or email us? Well, this might be a seller like in China or someplace overseas that puts a telephone number on their website for the sole reason of making people trust that it is a legitimate website. Does the website, or do the people behind the website offer things like pictures of the pearls that you're going to receive? You'll find that if you email many websites, they'll say, oh, I'm sorry, we don't offer pictures, or no, we can't take pictures, or no, everything is made to order. Well, the reason they're telling you that is because they don't have the pearls. They're not actually selling their own pearls. And so it's doesn't take a lot of homework to determine whether or not you're dealing with a legitimate, reputable seller. Just by calling the number. Do they answer? No, they don't answer. Nope, you can't leave a message. Okay, email them. Okay, can you send me a picture of the pearls I'm actually going to receive? Nope. Well, there you go. Strike one, strike two. Don't even go to strike three. They're out.
Very good advice. And Jeremy, there's actually some scams here on YouTube too. Do you want to talk a little bit about those?
Scams on YouTube. Oh, yes, one big one. Scam is kind of a strong word for this, I would say. But in a way, it's sort of a trick. That is these pearl in the oyster things that you'll see a lot of. I think they were about 2 years ago, they were trending pretty strongly. And so many people were logging on to watch people open these oysters and harvest these pearls. And the crazy thing is that they're harvesting, or they're opening these little tiny Akoya oysters, baby Akoya oysters, and they're pulling out freshwater pearls, or they're pulling out dyed pearls. They're pulling out pearls that cannot be grown in those shells. So it's sort of a little industry trade secret. And the reason I say it's a secret is because this has been going on for a long time. If you go to Hawaii, you see these booths where you can, ring a bell, choose an oyster, open your oyster, pull out your pearl, get it set in jewelry. And the story you'll hear from the people selling the pearls is that, we x-ray every oyster to make sure that everyone has a pearl, or, it's been growing in this shell for 4 years, et cetera, et cetera. Here's the truth. Okay. There are factories in China, and this is done exclusively in China. It used to be done also in Japan, but now it's done in China, where they take shells from hatcheries. And, pearl farms buy shells from hatcheries. That's what they use to grow pearls in the farms. And they buy these baby shells. And then they also buy loose pearls. And these loose pearls, they can be semi-round, they can be dyed, they can even sometimes, this is crazy, they can even be drilled. I've seen drilled pearls come out of these things before. I guess the oyster drilled pearls from the inside out. I'm not sure. And so what they do at these factories is they open the shells, they take one of those pearls, they insert it into the oyster where you would expect to harvest one. And then they take the shell and they drop it into a solution of like alcohol and formaldehyde, which causes the shell to die and constrict and close. and then they put it in this this little bag that's like vacuum sealed so that it'll smell okay when it's opened a month or so later on the other side of the world, and the pearls are harvested. So the pearls that are being harvested on these YouTube shows were actually harvested, months before, years before, and then stuck into a baby oyster. And really what you're watching is, it's just a show. It's sort of make-believe.
Yeah. Jeremy, can you give us a quick rundown for the folks at home on the types of pearls and the commonly misunderstood pearl terminology?
Types of pearls. Well, there are, you probably heard before, you've got saltwater and freshwater, or you've got saltwater and cultured. There's more than that. It's definitely more than that. First and foremost, always cultured. Yes, there are natural pearls. Natural pearls do exist, but natural pearls haven't been harvested commercially, unless you're talking about a very small operation in Bahrain, which has been going on for a few years. They haven't been harvested commercially for about 100 years. Since Kokichi Mikimoto came up with the way of coaxing a shell to produce a pearl, all pearls have been cultured, all pearls on the market. And that includes saltwater pearls, freshwater pearls, doesn't matter what kind of pearl. So that's number one. After that, the types of pearls. You've got Akoya pearls, which I would describe as the classic, if you will. These are the pearls that have been around for, about 100 years, the first pearls that Kokichi Mikimoto cultured. These are the smaller pearls, the white, round, perfectly round white pearls, the pearls you think of when you think of a strand of white pearls. You're typically thinking of Akoya pearls. Next up, you've got freshwater pearls. Freshwater pearls are grown almost exclusively in China. There's a small production still happening in Japan. Originally, freshwater pearls were primarily from Japan, Lake Biwa in Japan, but Lake Biwa hasn't been actively producing on a large commercial scale for a couple of decades now. And
was it over farmed? Is that what caused the environment to decline in Lake Biwa?
No, it wasn't actually over farming in Lake Biwa. It was outside pollution. And well, I shouldn't say it wasn't over farming, because a lot of the pollution actually came from farming, but it wasn't pearl farming that created the problem. It was agriculture that created the problem. That and the cities that grew up alongside the lake. Really, the lake became highly polluted and basically destroyed the environment, so they could no longer grow pearls. And in Japan, you had Lake Biwa. Now you've got Lake Kasumigaura as well, where some pearls are still grown. Bead-nucleated pearls in the hybrid Hieropsis kumingi schlegeli shell. I may be going too deep down a rabbit hole. But there are some pearls still being grown in Japan, freshwater, but not necessarily in Lake Biwa. So now freshwater pearls are grown in either naturally formed lakes or man-made lakes and reservoirs in China. And there are thousands of them. And if you were to visit China and drive through Zhejiang and that part of China, as you drive down the road, you see just almost like plots of land. It's like when you drive through Nebraska. If you ever driven through Nebraska, it's like cornfield, 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 cornfield. Sort of how it is in that part of China. It's pearl farm, pearl farm, pearl farm.
I'm imagining a magical land of pearls.
I don't know if I would necessarily call it a magical land of pearls. It's beautiful to see, but it's an agricultural crop to them in a way that corn is an agricultural crop in Nebraska. And so a lot of these farms are small farms, even family farms. And so you'll see a home built with a little farm behind it that may only be, a couple of hectares in size, and they may only be growing enough pearls to harvest, I don't know, maybe a couple 100 kilos at a time. That might not even be enough to create one fine strand of pearls. So those are freshwater pearls that are grown in China. Then you've got black pearls, and I call them black pearls, although it's a bit of a misnomer, because black pearls or Tahitian pearls can be any color from white all the way to black and every color under the rainbow. Tahitian pearls, if they are Tahitian pearls, are grown uniquely in French Polynesia, not on the island of Tahiti, but out in the atolls like Takaroa, Maruteasu, Nego Nego, places outside of Tahiti proper. If these pearls are not grown in Tahiti, they are coming out of the same shell, but they're not called Tahitian pearls. For example, you've got Cook Island pearls, which are often actually sold as Tahitian pearls because they're basically identical, but they're not grown in Tahiti, so they're called Cook Island pearls. You've also got Marshall Island pearls. You've got black pearls that are grown in Micronesia. And then you've got pearls that are even grown in Fiji. Still the same type of pearl oyster with a slight differentiation. In Fiji, they use an oyster called the Pinctada margaritifera typica, while in Tahiti, it's the Pinctada margaritifera kumingi, which is basically the same shell. It's just a slight variation. So in Fiji, those Fijian pearls are also black pearls with more of a pastel coloration, a lot more oranges and lighter colors. Then you've got South Sea pearls, which are sort of the highest tier of pearls. And part of the reason is the shells only grow one pearl at a time. They have to grow in areas far, far removed from any sort of pollution. So we're talking hundreds of miles out into the outback if you're talking about Australia and Northwest Australia, or even thousands of miles out in the outback. And these pearls are grown in a shell called the Pinctada maxima, or the South Sea pearl oyster. It grows about the size of a dinner plate. So it's a pretty large shell. And these pearls you can see them as small as 9 or 10 millimeters, but for the most part, you're looking at 11, 12 millimeters on the small size, up to 17, 18 millimeters on the large size. And a strand of those cultured pearls can cost upwards of $100,000 for a really, really fine strand.
Are there any misconceptions about these categories of pearls that you feel should be disputed to the consumer?
Misconceptions. Well, the number one misconception is that only Akoya pearls are cultured. And I would say that because years past, the only type of cultured pearl was the Akoya pearl. So a lot of jewelers today will still refer to Akoya pearls as cultured. So the misconception is that other pearls aren't cultured, but they are all cultured. Another misconception that I see quite a bit is the color. And I think we just touched on this in those pearl oyster opening parties on YouTube. They'll often harvest pearls that are black or gray or silver. Those are not natural colors. Dark colors appear in in Tahitian pearls or Fijian pearls, pearls from the Pinctada margaritifera. Other shells don't produce those colors. They don't produce black colors. So black is not a natural color unless it comes specifically from that shell. So if you've got a black Akoya pearl, it's dyed. If you have a black freshwater pearl, like you're wearing, it has been color treated. It is dyed. The color is not natural. And it's a misconception because people know that those black pearls exist, and they think they're buying naturally black pearls. And the truth is they're buying color treated pearls, which may or may not last, or the color may or may not last. It may fade.
In black pearls specifically, can the natural color and the dyed color be distinguished visually?
Oh, absolutely. Can they be distinguished visibly by anyone and everyone? With a bit of practice, yes. Absolutely, I would say with a bit of practice. For example, if we were to sit down in our virtual studio and pull out a strand of black Akoya pearls, black freshwater pearls, and black Tahitian pearls, and I showed you, you can see there's a definite difference in the colors. The dyed pearls will typically be more of a monotone color. If they're not a monotone color, they'll often have colors that they just don't look natural. And it's hard to really put your finger on what that means unless you see them side by side. With black pearls that are natural, say Tahitian pearls, for example, you're going to have a base color, you're going to have a secondary color, you're going to have overtones. It's just a different look. And, I'm not going to use the term fake because fake isn't good there, but non-natural just has a very specific look to it. And I think anyone with a few minutes even of sitting down and really examining the difference with a professional would then be able to take that knowledge just about anywhere and determine whether or not they're buying naturally black or dyed black pearls. Now, there's a caveat here because there are naturally golden South Sea pearls. Now, South Sea pearls are also dyed gold or dyed yellow. The reason is because golden South Sea pearls are some of the most valuable pearls on the planet. And gold South Sea is extraordinarily valuable. Yellow South Sea is not valuable. Or well, I shouldn't say it's not valuable. It's definitely not as valuable as gold. So maybe about 25% of the value is gold strand. So processors will take yellow strands and they will dye them gold. These are much, much more difficult to spot because they genuinely look like golden South Sea pearls. You do have to have more of an expert eye to determine whether or not they're natural. And typically it comes down to, well, for myself, for example, if I'm buying at a show or from a dealer in Asia, if the strands of the loose pearls are deeply golden and the price does not match what is being sold, that's a first dead giveaway because it's like selling $100 bill for $20. People just don't do it. Okay. And then there's also other more subtle ways to see. Looking in the flaws, for example. Typically, dye will concentrate in divots in the pearls. So if you've got like a flaw, a deep flaw in a pearl, and it's been dyed, you'll often see like a dark concentration of the dye. There's also, if the strand is or the pearl's been drilled, you can often see a line demarcation through the drill hole between the nucleus and the nacre where the dye will sort of concentrate itself. So you can see sort of a dark line in there as well. So there's ways to tell. If you're a professional buyer, though, it's typically pretty obvious. And if it's a professional seller, there's very few that would try to pull the wool over the eyes of a professional buyer because that would end the relationship immediately. And I've never seen a dye job good enough to fool me. And the same thing goes actually with Akoya pearls because Akoya pearls are known to be white, but there's also blue and silver blue and gold. Gold is extraordinarily rare. If it's natural, they can be dyed though in gold. Silver blue it's a bit more rare than white, but silver blue is either naturally occurring because of it's called a mononucleus. It's actually a mistake made during the grafting process. The incision isn't quite clean enough and it doesn't heal properly. So the oyster secretes a layer of organic substance over the nucleus before the pearl grows, which is brown. And as the nacre forms, it shines through as blue. Now, the other way to create blue Akoya pearls is to subject the pearls to something called cobalt-60 radiation, which changes the color of the nucleus. It actually interacts with the manganese of the freshwater bead nucleus, which causes the nucleus to sort of turn brown. And so then the brown nucleus shows through the white nacre and it turns the pearl blue. Okay, so now you've got two blue pearls, a blue naturally occurring Akoya and a radiation treated Akoya pearl. They look very similar, very different. And once again, the value difference is astronomically different.
Wow. What are some of the major myths that pearl shoppers are told?
The number one myth. This has to be the number one myth. Only because I've been dealing with it for 25 years now. Pearls do not form around a grain of sand. That's it. Okay. That is the number one myth. Pearls do not form around a grain of sand. Now people will argue that, and I've seen people argue until they're blue in the face. Well, they can form around a grain of sand. It's like, well, yeah, pearls can form around anything in a way, but that's not what creates the pearls. Okay, if pearls formed around a grain of sand, when you went to the beach, you'd be walking on pearls, not sand. Okay, pearls form naturally when there's a displacement of what are known as epithelial cells. And okay, I'll get a little technical here. You've got a shell Okay, and the shell has an organ around each side of the lip or each side of the valve, and it's called the mantle. Okay, and this mantle muscle, and I'm saying muscle M-U-S-C-L-E, not M-U-S-S-E-L, which produces freshwater pearls. This mantle muscle has these cells called epithelial cells. And these epithelial cells have one job in life, just one, and that is to grow the shell, which is why the shell just keeps growing and growing and growing. And so these cells on the lip of the shell, all they do is secrete the substance called nacre. Okay? So when these cells get displaced inside this mollusk, oyster, pearl oyster, they continue doing what they're genetically programmed to do, and that is to create nacre. Now, there's also another step of, forming into a pearl sac and then secreting the nacre in sort of an enclosed space in the body. But, to keep it simple in layman's terms, it's basically taking these cells that are pointed at the top of the shell and secreting this nacre to grow this shell for their entire life and turning them around. Okay? Once they turn around, or the shell gets damaged, for example, let's say a boring worm. And I say boring not in the sense of somebody's boring, but like the boring worm, they bore through the shell. That sort of a boring worm. It might drill through the shell and go through the mantle, okay, which is that, like I said, that muscle right at the lip of the shell, and go through the mantle and pick up some of those cells as it's going through the mantle into the body of the oyster. So what did that worm just do? It just took some of those cells from the mantle and took them inside the oyster. Okay. Now these are still living cells. Well, that's how a natural pearl will then form. Or it could be damage to the shell. Say, I don't know, an otter or a shark might bite the shell and like create some damage to the shell and push some of those cells down into the oyster. That's how the natural pearls form. They do not get formed because this oyster gets a piece of sand in their gonad or something. And say gonad, that's actually where pearls are cultured. So I should have pointed that out first. It's not because a piece of sand gets stuck somewhere in the oyster and it becomes irritating, and the shell gets irritated. So in order to stop the irritation, it coats this grain of sand. And I'm saying all this because I've read this before. I've seen this before. This is how it's been explained. The sand irritates the oyster, and so the oyster needs to protect itself from the sand. So it coats that intruder with this smooth nacre, which makes it just feel all nice inside. No. Okay, oysters don't have central nervous systems. They don't get irritated. They don't care about sand. If they cared about sand, they wouldn't live in the ocean.
Jeremy, I love your passion on this topic. Your excitement is truly contagious. As we're wrapping up here, can you just go over some of the resources that pearl shoppers and jewelry professionals alike can use so that they're confident and accurate when discussing, selling, and buying pearls?
Probably the best resource online for general consumers and actually trade as well is Pearl Guide, and it's pearl-guide.com. It has a discussion forum on it, and the discussion forum has like over 9,000 members, and really a lot of these members are pearl collectors, pearl aficionados. We have pearl farmers, pearl dealers, pearl traders, pearl processors. They're all people who love pearls. And they're not there to sell anything either. That's one of the rules of Pearl Guide is there's no advertising, there's no selling. All it is discussions. And so if consumers want to ask a question about pearls, or if they have a strand of pearls that their grandmother gave to them, or a family member gave to them, and they want to know what kind of pearls they are, or maybe even like a approximate valuation, they can post a photo on Pearl Guide, and they'll get responses within minutes. It's a very active forum. I'm actually on it every day myself. It's sort of like the news for the industry, if you will. So I would say that's probably the best, the number one resource, general resource online. That's pearlguide.com. And the next resource I would say is Pearls As One. Pearls is as One is a Pearls course. And it is a Pearls course that I did write. I wrote this course personally. I created it for the Cultured Pearl Association of America. It was an idea I took to them back in 2015 and basically said to them, look, we need some sort of educational resource out there that really goes deep into pearls, that covers everything up to date, because the industry was constantly changing. I mean, we have bead nucleated freshwater pearls now. We've seen pearl nucleated pearls. We've seen souffle pearls. We've seen all these new technologies that are constantly happening. And yet most of the educational resources were written 2 decades ago or 3 decades ago, and they're not up to date. So the Cultured Pearl Association of America said, sure, let's do it. And would you write it? And so I wrote it. It took nearly just under a year to write and produce. And I actually did it with a friend of mine, Caitlin Williams, who is the late, she passed away, which is why I call her late, admin of the Pearl Guide Forum. Great friend of mine, passionate Pearl lover. She and I worked together for almost a year writing this course, and it is 10 chapters long. It takes 10 modules long. It's filled with photos, with videos, and it launched in 2016. Since then, it has enrolled just under 100,000 students. It's in 10 languages. It's been promoted by gemological associations all over the world. Even friends of mine from GIA have all taken the course because it's really the best course out there right now. And I say that even though I wrote the course, there is nothing else out there that's quite like it, because it covers every type of pearl that's on the market, and it dispels all these myths that are passed down really from generational families and jewelers, from friends, from unscrupulous sellers. Even it just dispels all the myths and takes you to more or less a textbook expert level in about 2 weeks.
Amazing. It really is a tremendous resource. I've taken it myself. I recommend it to anybody who's shopping for pearls or who sells pearls, especially. If I had my way, every single person in every single jewelry retail store would take this class. And there's no reason not to, because you can get it for free. Isn't that right, Jeremy?
You absolutely can. When we launched for the CPAA, originally they wanted to sell the course, and they did. They have sold the course. It's available for $599, and there are many people who have paid for the course. That being said, the idea was not really to make money from the course. It was to educate people, educate frontline salespeople, educate buyers, educate consumers. It really removed the veil that has been in front of the knowledge in this industry for so many years. And so we created sponsorship codes for all the members of the Cultured Pearl Association of America. So any member of the CPAA, has their own sponsorship code, and they allow all of their salespeople, their customers, jewelry stores, for example, to train their staff using that code, which allows them into the course for free. And I made a code for you, right?
Thank you, Jeremy.
there is a code for you, and that code is JOTT. Now, that's not a password. It's a discount code, which means if you go to pearlsas1.org and you enroll, when you get to the payment page, and it asks for your credit card, and they, wants to charge you $599. Don't pay. Instead, click that little box that says, I have a discount code. Type in JOTT, and you will get a 100% discount, which makes it absolutely free, and you'll be taken directly into the course.
I told you there's no reason not to do it. Jeremy, thank you so much for taking the time and giving us so much information and knowledge.